So, welcome, Elena. Welcome to Pocket Pals. So, Elena taught yoga at Sky when I was working there, and massive positive energy. Great, made me hug people, which is strange as a Londoner. It's just like, oh, okay. And yeah, I mean, I'd love, Elena, if you could introduce yourself and let us know about yourself.
I mean, I already love that my initial introduction is I made Londoners do the weird thing of hugging people. I think that is perfect. I'm going to add that to my official bio on all things.
Yes.
But yeah. Um, so yeah, I've been teaching yoga for 9 years as of this year. The pandemic makes time fly. So is I've officially reached senior yoga teacher status, and one of my London friends was like, "I don't like it. It makes you sound old." I'm like, "No, it's amazing." But yeah, 9 years of teaching yoga and Sky. Honestly, getting to teach there was so much fun. It really was getting to because teaching in offices just meant getting to teach. I mean, it's my favorite thing is teaching people who won't go to yoga studios necessarily. And so then I get, somebody like you who comes into class because it's at work. And the next thing you know, you're hugging strangers.
I mean, it's it's. I mean, I do martial arts, so like we do hugging, but it's like a different kind of hugging. Um,
Is it
so
hugging or is it choking?
I mean, it's a friendly. No, yeah, it's joking. But I mean, with regards to corporate Sky and just corporate things, like what made you choose like kind of the corporate world, and and what differences do you see with that and just a normal like yoga studio?
Yeah, so tiny bit of context, right, is that I'm not from the UK. And my accent, I never know what it's going to sound like and what bits people are going to pick up based on who I've spoken to and where I'm living. But obviously, so I'm Italian American, and while America definitely doesn't have great press, one thing we are known for is being quite like outgoing, and Italians are definitely hugging, open, welcoming people. And so then my bizarre draw to London and choice to immigrate there was a bit at odds with my big open arm hugging ways. And so when I moved to London, actually before I moved to London, I knew I wanted to leave America. Like from the first time I left it at 13, I knew that I didn't want to stay living there. And so I lied about my age at 14, got two jobs, and saved up the money to fly myself back across the ocean at 15 as a tourist, and then just never went more than 2 years without crossing the ocean and leaving the States. And so on one of my touristy visits to London, I was walking through what I now understand is the city of London, but as a tourist, I was clueless. I had no idea that I was in like the financial district. I was just like, I'm in London. And I just remember that like people looked miserable, like a level of shutdown. Dead eyes might be a bit too harsh, but like very like closed down eyes, like very cold, very unwelcoming and miserable. And it was just this level I've not seen before. And I was like, I love this place. And I'm walking around here and everybody looks miserable. And I just kind of thought, I need to figure out what is going on right here where I am. And I need to start teaching yoga. I mean, like my yoga teaching name, right, is the Lovely Catalyst. And I was like,
Mm.
oh, this is the financial district of London. Well, if I can make them a little happier, that could actually be a catalyst for some big change. And that's kind of when the seed was planted in my mind of I wanted to teach in offices. I thought I could make a much bigger impact helping the people in the classes, but then by default, they're maybe they'll feel a little better. So then when they go home, they might be a little bit happier, or like when they're interacting with colleagues, or when they're going about what the decisions are that they're making in the world, they might be approaching it in a slightly kinder, happier way than if they didn't have yoga. And I thought that's much bigger impact than me going to a yoga studio for people who have already decided that they want yoga. And, I was like, I want to go to the place that clearly needs it. And to me, it is the workplaces of London, and especially originally the finance district. And so then I just kind of had a clear vision in my head that when I was going to immigrate to London, I was going to teach in offices, and that was it. Like, I actually never taught in any yoga studios in London at all.
Wow. I know, I didn't know that. So that's really cool. And like so and actually I think you kind of brought up the word. So why the lovely catalyst? Like I really like that as well because it feels like something in an engine, but I just yeah. So how did you come up with that name?
I mean, it was kind of an accident. And also, I mean, I am technically just a sole trader, so I never quite know how to say I'm the lovely catalyst, because it's not like a limited business. I'm not a business. I'm me teaching out of my living room most of the time. But thanks to COVID. But so it just kind of it hit me one day. I'd it probably was maybe 2 years into teaching that I added that name and made that kind of the name of my website and stuff. And it was, and then like my social media handles and everything. And it, in kind of slight rewind, I did my initial teacher training that you must do to be a yoga teacher. And then I went off a year and a half later and did another 100 hours of teacher training. And one of the casual homework assignments they gave us in this teacher training was to figure out your life's purpose. Literally walked into the training room one day and it was just written on the whiteboard. And it was like, yeah, so, by the end of the week, decide what your life purpose is. No big deal.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty hefty. And I struggled, and I kind of debated, like, not debated, but kind of, chatted it through, discussed it with like a smaller group, and we were all kind of helping each other. And I kind of landed on something that was very clunky in the wording, and it was like about like helping people like passionately like come alive, but what I really meant was like find their passions. And I still didn't quite land, but that's what I ended up writing. And so then I think that started it ticking over, and so then it was percolating in my brain. And then a bit later, kind of, I just went, the lovely catalyst. I like that. It feels right. I just love it. And then kind of like I said, like it's my website name and it's my social media handles, but I'm not a business. I'm Elena, a sole trader. So I always feel like conflicted introducing it, but it's now gone further, and it definitely has its origins in like that walking through the city of London and seeing people looking miserable and going, wow, if I can help them, it can ripple outwards and it could be a catalyst for good. And it really comes to that, like in in all areas of life, I think I always come back to like, I just want to be a catalyst for good things. I just want people to be their happiest, best selves. If I see somebody miserable and they're doing something that is soul sucking for them, I want to sit down and say, what do you really want in life? And encourage them to go do it. If I see people miserable in the city of London, I decide that I have to immigrate there and start teaching them yoga in offices. It's like, I want people to to just kind of spur on for goodness. And then sneakily, what I really love, and I don't think any of my students ever clock this, but it makes me smile and laugh to myself while I teach, is I'll often say something like, oh, let's just give our necks a little TLC, like do a little like massage of your neck. But TLC is the lovely catalyst, but it's also tender loving care. And I
I
really
love
like
it.
that play on words, even if it's just like an inside joke for myself in my head. Yeah.
Wow. I know. Yeah, I do remember you saying TLC quite a bit, and now it makes sense. Oh, you tricked me
Yeah.
with that one.
Nobody knew. I was just inceptioning you to be a catalyst for good and also give yourself TLC.
That's amazing. And actually, so that's, I mean, there's something, what, like, obviously there's yoga, and yoga is like almost like a means to kind of help with that positivity. Where do you think that drive to kind of make people more positive comes from? So I'm kind of, yeah, unraveling that. So where do you think that's kind of come from?
Yeah, well, so it's a weird thing. Originally, my whole world, and nobody in the UK really knows because I retired before I moved to the UK, was about dance. That was my entire life. So when I was a baby, basically my first sentence was, "I want to do ballet." And the way my mom tells it is that was all I said to her over and over and over again. I was 18 months old and I would just keep saying it. And she was like, "Oh, you're 18 months old. You can't go to ballet." And, she asked like every ballet school near where we lived. And no, everyone was like, "Wait till she's 3. We won't take anyone younger than 3." And so apparently she had to reason with this really annoying baby that kept telling her she wanted to do ballet. And she said that when I turned 3, I blew out the candle, turned to her, and said, "I want to do ballet." And so the reason I'm sharing that is I think for me, there was some kind of innate, I want to do this and I love this and it makes me happy, that I can't even explain. It predates my conscious memory. It's just what it was. And I went on to dance for 23 years. I got my degree in dance. I danced professionally for 6 years. It was my entire life. Like, I always feel quite lame when people are like, "Oh, were you into techno? Did you go clubbing? Did you do this?" And I was like, "I was in rehearsals. I danced." Like, I literally, they're like, "Yeah, dancing." I'm like, "Not in a club, ballet."
Yeah.
Rehearsals. I was very lame. I was very focused. I was doing that. I wasn't doing anything else. And so I guess what happened is because I was so clear on this thing, that was what I wanted. And then there was like the transition to where I eventually stopped dancing and switched to yoga. And that was quite hard and tricky to come to terms with, but also just felt right. And now that's been my trajectory for like a decade, right? But I've always been very clear on following my heart and following happiness. And I think that's just been innate in my life. And I've been very privileged and lucky that I've had the support to be able to do that, in the sense of like, my parents just went, "This is Elena." and, and as much as they were probably worried and didn't want me to be like a starving artist, I used to hear that a lot growing up, like, they still kind of went, "This is her and this is what she loves." And like, I worked loads, probably too hard. I did work really hard from a very young age and constantly. But I just was very clear on what made me happy and what mattered to me, and I focused on it. And I was so supported by them in that, that I think, especially by the time I got to like uni age and I'd meet people and they would, I was at a school that was very tech geeky, and a lot of them had no idea that you could be a dance student there. And so
Right.
I would meet people, and kind of the usual chat is, "Oh, what are you studying?" And they'd say computer science, and I'd say, "Oh, why?" And they go, "Because my parents said I have to so I can make money." And then they say, "What do you do?" And I'd say, "Dance." And they go, "They have that here?" And then they're like, "Why are you doing that?" And I'm like, "Because I love it." And they're like, "Huh." And I think that kind of started this thing in my head of like, here's all these kids studying something they don't enjoy because their parents are telling them they have to make money. And I'm thinking, I'm really lucky that I have parents who supported me to have like joy in my life and passion and purpose and happiness. It's not like they like handed me loads. They've obviously had to help me over the years because I've never had a salary, but they've also like taught me to work hard so that I could do what I love without salaries. And so I found it really sad to see so many people not happy and like signing away 4 years of their life to not happiness, to then get a job. Like, I graduated right in the big economic crash of 2008. So all those kids who went into like finance and science, and then there was no jobs when we graduated.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I
And
mean,
it's one thing if you love it.
I graduated in 2012, and I remember it was just like it was such a nightmare, even knowing what you wanted to do. That's why I understand what you mean by, um, you had like a week to decide what you want to do. I still don't know what I'm doing a podcast now. I'm a tech guy.
That's cool.
I did maths as a degree. I did philosophy. There's all sorts of things I do. Yeah, you've really kind of pointed out something that's really interesting. I mean, how do you deal with people who have those kind of rules? because obviously you want to kind of break. This is the vibe I guess I'm getting, where you want to kind of like break those rules where people have those kind of rules in their head that they must do something. That, almost like you probably see it in yoga. They're almost like this. Like, how do you help move them out of that?
Well, and it's an interesting thing because so like in yoga, for example, there can be styles of yoga that are quite regimented and very like rigid styles. And as you know from experience, that is not the style I teach. um, but I mean, things that I would do in a yoga class, because I mean, the reality is like yoga, right? I don't know, there's so many, it's vast. It's an ancient Indian tradition. It has hundreds of schools of yoga. It has thousands of pages of beautiful Sanskrit texts. It influences Taoism and Hinduism and Buddhism. Like, it's vast. To package it up into a little bow and say this is what yoga is not easy. But I would say that in like 2022 in the UK and the US, yoga is often thought of and packaged up neatly in a bow as like, oh, it's like a workout. Or there's like the holier than thou spiritual yoga studio kind of vibe, right? Or the really like strict and disciplined vibe. There's all sorts of ways, but probably if you've never done yoga, you might be like, oh, it's like a hippie new agey thing, or oh, it's like workout because you've seen like sculpt yoga, right? But what's at the heart of yoga from what I've studied and what I've learned is that yoga is about noticing and observing how you are. As in, if I'm putting you in like warrior 2 and making you hold warrior 2 for like, I know you had to think it's been a few years. If you're having to
Yes.
hold warrior 2 for like
Is that
arms
the
out,
one? Is that the one?
feet bending, legs, stretch the back leg. It's that one. It's very, you're holding that and I'm making you hold it for like 10 minutes. 10 breaths. 10 breaths is more reasonable.
Yeah, please.
Then, and even that is pretty unreasonable in my opinion, but 10 breaths, let's say. Yoga isn't Dev does warrior 2 with perfect alignment. No, yoga is what's going on in his brain as he's there. He might be going, wow, this is really hard. This is really hard. I hate this. I hate this. It's so hard. I want to skip out of this. I'm going to straighten my leg a little. Elena won't notice. Or he might be going, this is really hard. I can tell it's a challenge and I want to show that I can really do this challenge. So I'm going to push really, really hard. Or he might go, wow, this is a bit challenging, but I can do this and I'm going to breathe. Okay, I'm noticing as I'm breathing that like my muscles are really starting to ache. But is it a good hurt or is it bad hurt? Okay, I'm going to breathe here. I'm going to use my breath to calm my nervous system. This is okay. Okay, I can do that. That's what yoga is. It's what happens in your brain when you're confronted with those shapes. And then that spills out into your everyday life. Like you might remember chair pose, which is one I hate. I used to always make us do. And I would say, once we all smile, we get out of it. And it wasn't because I thought it was brilliant. I hate that pose. It's because life throws us hard things a lot of the time. And I genuinely think if we can shift our mindset, we can make it easier for ourselves. And so the second everybody has to smile, they all kind of like lighten up and they exhale and something shifts in the nervous system and like the mood lightens and then it's all okay. And then I also tell you it's over now and you're like, oh, great. And so when you're saying like, how can you kind of help people get out of their own way or get out of those patterns that they're stuck in, I think in a way it can happen in a yoga class. It can happen in saying like, let's have a laugh and something that's challenging, or in London making you hug 4 strangers. A great way to get out of that mindset of like scowling and rushing past everybody and realizing that there's like other humans in the room with you and making eye contact. That's something London really misses.
It's really, yes, it's something that I've had to really like learn, like because I teach kung fu now as well. So if someone's new, like you have to look someone in the face, right? Especially if you're going to hit them. So like, but you have to be comfortable with like just being relaxed around them. So like it's kind of from the other way around. But yeah, I see exactly what you mean. I mean, how did you find that? Like obviously like where you've come from, like an Italian and an American background, and like we're kind of looping back to the beginning, but I think it's like seeing like Londoners that wouldn't even look at each other in the face, probably even just walked out of the class because once they're done, they're done. Like, how did you break that kind of system? Was it just through the yoga or?
Well, I always kind of, from when I first started traveling to the UK, and then I studied for an MA back in 2008 in Southampton for a year. And then had to go back to America because my student visa ran up, and then finally got it back in like 2016. So it's been a back and forth for a long time. But I remember kind of, I would always describe to my American family and friends that like I felt like I had to kind of wear English people down. What I mean is like
Yes.
my way of being is not their way of being, and my smiley nature and trying to crack a joke in a challenging pose or to make people hug or make eye contact is not the norm. And so I kind of, it almost felt like I was like melting an iceberg and like thawing it out. And I persistence, time,
Mm.
and being genuine. I think if it was like, I think one thing that I hope my students know and get from me is that like I'm not smiling for smiling's sake. I'm not going to always be fine and easy and happy. Like you guys sometimes have seen me when I'm going through really tough times and I do show up a bit scared or sad or down or, like I don't want to like bring everybody down. My job is to give you a safe space and hopefully help you leave brighter. But I think it's an authenticity. I think if you're not being genuine and you're not being real, nobody will believe it. They'll know, they can smell bullshit. And so I think
Yeah.
like my students know this is decaf, but I have this massive mug that says yoga, tea, and naps. And if you see me holding that for an 8 a.m. class, it is coffee. It is never tea. And it is full caf. And you know it. I'm not a morning person. Just because I teach yoga doesn't mean I wake up at 5 a.m. and sip green tea and like, I'm not that. And I think my students know that. And I think that like that realness of like
Mm.
not pretending to be perfect, I think helps. I think even if I am quite a naturally resting, happy faced person, I'm never like forcing people to be happy. Like even with the hugs, I would say to people, look, like hugs are great for you. Hugs will be really good, but hugs might not be for everybody. So if it's a handshake or a high five or just eye contact and a hello, it's one of the H's. Hi, handshake, hug. It all starts with H. They're all valid. Just acknowledge your fellow humans, because I think it's important too to recognize that like I can't just show up into a room of like city bankers and say, okay, now hug people. I would wait months and months and months. Some of them I waited a year and a half before I sprung the hug idea on them. You might have just come to class once I'd already sprung it on Sky and I was just used to it. But like there were a lot of headquarters where I waited a long while before I introduced that bit because I wanted to make sure that it could be genuine and they could feel safe and comfy. And I'd kind of worn them down and thawed them out to the point where they were like, oh, she's a little different and she's not English. So that's our excuse for this is acceptable behavior.
To be fair, if you came in with a British accent and said you guys are going to hug, I'll be like, okay, what are you selling? I'll be like, whoa, 1 second, is this a cult?
Exactly. It would have been really, whereas you're like, oh, she's American. She just doesn't know we don't do that. Oh, she looks kind of Italian in her name. Like maybe they hug there. Yeah, they do that double kiss thing. It's fine.
Yeah, I remember actually once. So my wife did an Erasmus scheme, which is like a year out in Europe, and I went there, and the
Yeah.
first thing they did was give me a hug and 2 kisses, and I was like, uh, this is not comfortable. I left, right? Was it right, left? I don't want to end up like,
Sometimes you get the triple. It's super confusing. I just kind of hope for the best.
Yeah, just it's okay. Yeah, just give it. The kids, I just go, oh, okay, and then just slowly they do the British thing, like, it's fine. Oops.
Oh, yeah, yeah, but I don't know and that you get that a lot in London because especially pre-Brexit, right? Like so many Europeans, but then so many Londoners, and you go out for like, and you're meeting people, and some people are just doing the handshake, some just say a polite hello with a head nod, some go for a 1 kiss or 3 kisses or 2, and you're like, it's a minefield.
It's great though. I mean that's what I love about London as well. I think, and it's got such a mix of people. Like even though when you go on a tube, they do look like a set of like zombies, people dead-eyed and just walking almost to a beat.
It's like
And
the intro
you
to Shaun of the Dead, right?
oh, it's great. No, it's like and this is it's you really do see like it's almost as if like they're programmed and you know adding to your thing. That the fact that you just wear them out so they actually become their authentic self. I think it's really really important. It was really good that you. And actually, that's a question I'm going to like. So why the move from London to Edinburgh? Because Edinburgh is quite authentic. So
It is. It was funny because for me, for the longest time, my goal was when I left the US, I was going to immigrate to London. And in my head, I always had it that I was going to be in London like 2 or 3 years. Then surely I was going to meet somebody nice and finally settle down because I'd put so much on my 20s towards the immigration process that I was like, okay, I probably won't be in London forever, but it will be good, and we'll see what happens. And then COVID started, and you're locked in. You're luckily I moved to an amazing cottage 4 weeks before lockdown, and it was south facing garden, and we had loads of space, and I had amazing people. So I had a very fortunate COVID experience. But even still, after 5 years of paying my London rents and having my singular shelf and a shared fridge and that one cupboard and all of that, and now I'm like locked down in this city. I remember watching like 101 Dalmatians, the animated one, because I missed what central London looked like, and I was only in Chiswick, but like I couldn't leave my place. And so having that time to just sit like we all did in 2020, and I kind of went, whoa, it's been 5 years and you're still in a flat share with your shelf in a shared fridge, and you're still paying your London rents. And at the time I was commuting about 5 hours a day to teach,
wow,
because I
wow.
would get up quite early for a non-morning person and have to commute across somewhere maybe 45 minutes, an hour, and be there 15 minutes early, teach the class pre-work for everybody. Then I'd commute somewhere else about an hour away, get there early, teach the lunchtime class, then commute somewhere else, get there, teach the post-work class, commute somewhere else, teach the post-work class, then commute all the way home. And I loved it. I loved being all over London. I loved going from neighborhood to neighborhood and all the different vibes and the different styles, and from like Shoreditch to Clapton to like, or Clapham, sorry, to like like all over. It was hilarious. Like super corporate places, super businessy city places, private homes, budget gyms, like everything, and all different bits. But it was also exhausting. And again, in lockdown, I kind of went, wow, it's really nice to like sit in your garden and have your coffee. And it's really nice to just have a bit of like calm and not have to commute all day, every day, and see everybody so miserable on the tube. And, um, and I couldn't commute anywhere. And so Scotland kind of popped into my head because I started thinking about how my initial plan had been that I was only ever going to be there like 3 years, and then I was going to move somewhere in the UK but not in London. And I was like, okay, well, you're single, you're like about to be 35, you're still in a flat share in London, and you can't even see London. And it's like, maybe it's time to see somewhere where a single yoga teacher can afford to live and actually like progress in something on the kind of like normal ladder, which sounds really boring, but I was just kind of like having this a bit of like, wow, I'm quite behind everybody else, which I realized was just probably like, COVID talking. And actually, I'm quite proud of what I've done. And I know that even if I've, never got married and had kids and did all those things, like I have done a lot and I'm very proud of it. But at the time, it was kind of hitting me like, I want to do something.
But I mean,
So I
this
started
is actually something.
researching Scotland.
I was just going to say this was actually something that I found. That's why as soon as I was like, this is a yoga teacher, like someone who was quite happy to work for what they enjoy, and the fact that whatever happened, like the fact that you well, 35 in a flat in London, and that's absolutely fine. In London, if you're surviving, you're killing it.
Super normal. If you're not a
Was it
trust fund
no?
baby or married or born in London, you are living in a flat share.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, and it's so inspiring to, keep like with that and break these people out of the mold, just being there for those 5 years, being the catalyst. It's so good. Now
Right.
Scotland have you. Scotland. So
Well, but I'm mostly teaching online, so I still have loads of Londoners in my classes.
oh,
But
brilliant.
what
And
was even, yeah, go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. Okay, yeah. No, I was going to say, do you think the transition from like going from studios to online was due to the pandemic, or and what advantages do you find being in a studio as opposed to like online? Sorry, I cut the other conversation short, so apologies about that. And if you want to go back to
No,
do.
it's fine. It was it was totally because of the pandemic. And I mean, I'm so grateful for it. It completely changed my life because as I was saying, I was commuting like 5 hours a day. And all of a sudden, the pandemic happened and I went like, "Oh, I have balance. I get to practice what I preach. I get to like eat a meal sitting still, not on the tube while commuting." Or, I had to often buy so many coffees from coffee shops just to have shelter from the weather in between classes because there wasn't time to go all the way home and then commute back out, but it's too early to show up at that office or this gym or, and so I would just be like hiding in Pretz to like shelter myself from the rain and the cold and, probably really amped up my coffee addiction. So, all of a sudden to have the pandemic and to just have this like honestly, I feel quite guilty how grateful I was during it because it really forced me to slow down. It really gave me a lot of peace. It also, in a weird way, I am very, very close to my family and I love them and miss them. And I have a gigantic Italian family. And in a weird way, I felt closer to them during it because suddenly we were all experiencing the same situation. And so instead of feeling like I'm the weird one living far away, having my UK life with UK politics and UK goings ons, and you guys are in your weird American life with your, it was like we were all in the world dealing with COVID. We were all in the world locked in our homes. And suddenly, like I set up like a weekly family call with the extended family of like 40 people. And so every Sunday we would all kind of like catch up. And it was just, it weirdly was a nice kind of reflective, quiet, restful, rebalancing, reconnecting time for me. And then Scotland popped into my head. And then everything I started reading about Scottish kind of like politics, but more so kind of like the ways that Scotland differs from England, really all resonated with me. And there was just so much that fit kind of me as the lovely catalyst. And so instead of feeling like I was like swimming against the current,
Mm.
trying to kind of get everybody to be my way, it was like, oh, I could kind of just give myself a break and be somewhere that kind of feeds how I am. And then that might give me more to give back. That after 5 years of hustling in kind of opposition to the norm. And so um, the pandemic led to online teaching for me, which then led to me being able to say, hey, I'm teaching you over FaceTime and Zoom anyway. Do you mind if I move to Edinburgh? To which everybody said, yeah, why not? And so then I just went for it.
I mean, I agree. I mean, I think now that we've learned how to do things online, it's opened up so much. I mean, I work from home. I get to see my kids grow up. I get to see my dog every day. Like I'm not like running backwards. It's such a difference, and just the mind space is like invaluable. And
Yeah.
yeah, and like and then, like I love the fact that you are kind of building up in Edinburgh or in Scotland. So it is Edinburgh, isn't it? I haven't
I am
got
in
this.
Edinburgh, yeah.
No, in Glasgow. Yeah, so in Edinburgh, and the fact that you've built that up, and you're spreading everything. And do you do any like like not online, offline, in person
In person,
meetups and stuff?
the
Yeah,
old
yeah.
way.
That's the old way, the traditional way.
I do. So at the moment, kind of the way my week works. So I've got like group online classes that actually some people from Sky have stuck with me on via those since the pandemic and are still like in classes every week, which is lovely. So and various like people across about a 10-hour time range join those
Wow.
classes. So those classes are 4 times a week, and I teach them from like right over there on the other end of my living room, and it's brilliant commute time, like everybody who works from home knows. And then I have one class a week that I do teach, yeah, in person, and that's in it's like it's a sweet little gym. So like I'm fine with teaching in gyms, but I'm not really a fan of yoga studios. So it's in a gym, and it's a lovely little group, and it's been this amazing group, and we've really kind of focused on the foundation since January, and we've been like slowly building up, and it is so beautiful seeing them kind of like getting it more and more, and just seeing them breathing, like flowing and relaxing. And I've had some people who come to that like once because they know that they want me to be able to check their alignment, and then they go, but actually I'd rather not commute, and I do like online, but I just wanted to do a class with you in real life first, and now I'll just do your online. And that's fine. And then I've got my retreat. So since the pandemic, the retreats was really like the only way I was getting to see people in real life to teach them initially. And so it was so special. I mean, that first one, I literally felt like I could cry hugging like my students. Of course, it's hugs, but hugging them again. And and that was actually, that reminds me when the initial lockdowns all happened, because you'd brought up about me making you hug, right? The first couple of weeks, my phone was filled with jokingly angry texts, because English people show love by being mean, right? So many texts going, Elena, it's your fault. I never hugged people, and then you came into my life and made me hug people, and now it's illegal, and I'm locked in my flat by myself. I'm so mad at you.
Oh, you
I
got
literally was
withdrawals.
so filled with those messages the first couple of weeks. It was like every Instagram messages, WhatsApp messages, text messages, emails, all my students were letting me know that I should not have got them into hugs if a pandemic was going to happen.
Oh, so you put them in withdrawal, basically. Hard withdrawal. Oh, that's so good. And so, I mean, like with your retreats, like, do you find that having that condensed set of sessions makes a big difference as opposed to like doing it once or twice or 3 times a week kind of thing? Like, what's the difference?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like a magical transformation. I had this one student who she has a few kind of chronic health conditions and a few things that make even just doing yoga hard and just impact her daily life on a regular basis. So she and I had done some one-to-one sessions online, and like slowly kind of built up just kind of adaptations, ways to make it work, her understanding of like how her body can do yoga and all of that. And she decided to take the plunge and do a retreat. And oh my God, after the retreat, I got this message from her. It was probably a full week after the retreat ended. And like on WhatsApp, if you get a long text and it fills like the entire screen and then some, it
It's
was
like
it
read
was
more.
beautiful. And it was like, yeah. And she was going, oh my God, ever since the retreat, I've kept up doing yoga twice a day, and everything is working so much better in my body. And I just feel incredible. And like my posture, because she's quite tall, she's like, my posture is incredible. And she's like, and my body is literally changing because the way I'm carrying myself and the way I'm moving and like all of it. And her parents had been away and she was dog sitting for them, and they came back. So they hadn't seen her since before the retreat. And they obviously had been supporting her with all the kind of stuff she'd had to be going through for these years with her health. And they firstly were like, we don't even recognize you. You look like a different person. And then like, secondly, her mom said, if I had known all you needed was a yoga retreat, I'd have sent you on one years ago. So
That's amazing.
absolutely. It can definitely make a difference, and it's different for everybody as far as what their experience is, because it's what they need. Like a lot of times I'll have like, especially mums, not to cancel out the dads, and obviously you being at home, it's different now, right? But traditionally usually most of the looking after kids and sorting out the family had always fallen on mothers, right? So I had one group of 4 moms who now had kind of teenage kids. They were on this retreat with me. And my big thing with my retreats is the food. Like, I almost forget
Mm.
to mention that obviously you'll be doing yoga. I'm just like, did you know there's going to be this meal and this meal? And then we're going to get dessert and we're going to get this. We get double breakfast. I just talk about the food. But for the mums, they could not stop saying that for them, the biggest thing was like, so nice that somebody else is feeding me. It's so nice that every day I wake up and I don't have to do the mental labor of figuring out what everyone's going to eat. I don't have to make my food. I don't have to make food for everybody else. I can just have these 4 days of being looked after and being fed. And for them, I think that was probably more transformational. Obviously, the yoga impacted them and they loved it and they grew from it. But for them, it was just being taken care of and getting that like of the, because it's a lot of emotional weight that especially traditionally mums have to carry and just wives have to carry,
Mhm.
unfortunately, and it's changing, but it's slow going, and we've got hundreds of years that were the other way around, so it's not like an overnight flip the switch situation.
But I mean, it's interesting because Amisha's now a stay-at-home mom, which is great because we're all at home, and
Yeah.
and you do see that, and it's even if like there's some parts a father can't do, like feed, if that makes unless they have a
Mm.
bottle, and being awake all night and all of the even though she's a yoga instructor, so she's had to kind of sacrifice the yoga to look after the baby, kind of thing, and yeah, it makes a huge difference. Like just having that taken away. Like we sometimes have our hour dates, and she's like, they're like the best all week because it's all gone for like that 1 hour that we drop off to mum and just run out. So yeah, it's so good. And actually, so something.
And
I mean, obviously. Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah. So like one thing I would, because obviously you've been dealing with people for like now you're a senior yoga instructor for like 10 years. What problems do you see are the most common in people, and like is there a certain I mean is there a certain set of people that have like certain problems? Is there another set of people that have other problems? Like what have you seen in terms of um physical issues or maybe mental issues? But yeah, what have you seen?
I was gonna ask like what you meant when it comes to like problems. I think what it is, one of the big things is that people need that headspace, which is actually what I was about to say. So you saying that you and your wife getting that hour where you drop the kids off and you're like, wow. Like, oh, our brains are like free and we're not constantly thinking of all this other stuff that we have to do, right? Like, all of us have some level of that, though it massively gets heightened if you're a parent, right? But we all have that because you probably had loads of that before you were ever a parent, and you couldn't imagine how you would have the headspace for a parent like life. And now you're like, whoa, this is even more. Now those guys have it so easy who aren't parents, right? But like we all have that level, and a lot of times I'll say to my students, in yoga, there's a certain type of breath that you are ideally meant to practice throughout the entire practice, the entire class. And we talk about it sometimes, and I say, look, it's weird, right? It's a weird kind of way of breathing, and it takes focus, and you have to think about it to do it. And so I say, why do you think that would be the yogic breath? And then a lot of times they'll kind of figure it out, and they'll go, it's because if I'm having to do that, I don't have headspace to think about that annoying email I just got right before class started, or I can't think about what dinner I have to cook after. All I can think about is all the alignment you're telling me and how to do this weird way of breathing while I'm doing the alignment. I'm like, exactly. it's the opportunity to give you that headspace, which I think is a problem, if we want to call it that, that all of us have. And it's the reason why yoga and meditation, because yoga really is, in regards to meditation, yoga is one, kind of a moving meditation, and two, yoga as we see it in like the UK and the US in 2023, I think I said 2022 earlier, is we see it as like a workout, right? But actually it is that those movements, those poses, they are all preparing the body to sit cross-legged and meditate.
Mm.
That is the point of them. They're not to look cool on Instagram or TikTok. They're not to look like a textbook of somebody from 100 years ago. They are purely to prepare your body to be able to sit and focus on clearing those thoughts and just giving your brain space again. That's all they're about. And that is a problem that we all have and we desperately need these days. I mean, I'm quite bad about, I always have something playing in the background, some kind of noise or TV, and like get sucked into my book, and I've got a million notebooks or journals, and then I do yoga and I'm like, wow, that was really nice. I needed that hour of non-overstimulation.
Do you find that because you're hard work? Because I mean, I've got a very similar issue. Like even when I'm working, I've got to put Netflix on. I've got to put something on in the back. Like, do you find that that's something that happens when you're because you're working hard? Like, could you? I mean, yeah.
Mm. Well, for me, I think I figured out the source of it years ago. And I think it is, I grew up, my parents got divorced when I was really young. So I was like one of the early latchkey kids, as in like got myself to school, got myself home to school, from school, picked out my own clothes in the morning from a young age. Like I started working at 14. So I would go from school, get off the bus, go to my job, get home late, and then do homework and then start again. So I spent a lot of time where I'd be in a house by myself, and I think that made me nervous. I had like a kind of like anxious predisposition about that. And so if I was at my house by myself and I heard the fridge making noise or like something creaking in the wind, it would like scare me, like, oh my God, somebody's coming into the house. So I started putting on the TV in the background as like a coping mechanism, kind of like people use white noise to fall asleep. I would use like Friends reruns to kind of make me feel safe so I wouldn't notice every little noise that would scare me. And so then I realized that in hindsight, because then in my 20s, I noticed that I couldn't kind of relax and focus and do work unless I had background noise, and finally kind of unpacked that and went, oh, that was a coping mechanism from growing up on your own sometimes, or like being in an empty house and being scared. And so it's just kind of a carryover. Like when I hang out with my boyfriend, I'm fine and I don't need it. But he owns his home, I own my home. So when I'm at mine by myself, I do put it on. It's like I just, otherwise every little noise, and now it's my own house. It's not even like I can call my parents and be like, come home, what was that? They're 5,000 miles away. I got to deal with it. So I have that. That background noise for me is like an anti-anxiety hangover from, yeah, being a latchkey kid.
But I mean, it does show, like, even, with the practice of yoga, we still have, our little quirks. And, like, say, I mean, I do Kung Fu, yeah, I would still be scared for confrontation, and it is what it is, even though people go, oh, you look like you can fight. And I'm like, yeah, but if someone says they're going to square up to me, I'm going to be like, oh, I'm still going to feel it. And it's the same with
Like,
yoga, yoga's, yeah, you know, that's happened before. And I'm like, whoa, I don't want to fight, come on, this is like the last thing. And the same with like yoga as well, right? You want to keep yourself mindful, but actually that's, I mean, how do you feel like when you do yoga? I mean, have you done yoga to kind of help with that, or has that helped you in a way?
so
Or
yeah, absolutely. So for me, I would say that probably when I started to fall in love with yoga was after I realized I had anxiety. And so for me, it is something that massively helps and it gives me the tools, but it doesn't make me like bulletproof to anxiety. We live in a world that's pretty terrifying. And I think there's a part of me that I'm quite like a bleeding heart, shall we say? So it's like, what is happening in the world? I don't just go, oh, well, that sucks, and then like close my phone. For me, I'm like, ugh, like I feel it, and it sits with me, and I find it really hard, and I really don't like knowing how many horrible things are happening, but I also don't want to close my eyes to it because it's what my students are facing as well, and I want to be aware so that I can hold space for how they're feeling and know that they're existing in that reality, and so I exist in it. And then doing that, it does feed my anxiety to be aware of all of that and to feel it kind of empathetically the way I do. And so it's like this balance of like, I want to be aware because I want to be knowledgeable and like have some context for my students of how they might be feeling. So like, for example, I have this one class that is like yoga discussion. We call it yoga school. And we just sit and chat every week, and it's great. But like, one of my old childhood friends has started joining from America, which is amazing. But that means that when there's like shootings, when there's like racial injustice, which means every day, so every week, she's having to deal with that stuff happening, and then get onto a call with mostly people in the UK who that isn't their reality daily. That's not what their experience has been that day, but I know it has been for her. I know she maybe didn't get sleep the night before because she sends her kids to a school similar to the school that had that shooting yesterday. And now she's having to wake up and get on a call with people who don't know that, and then talk philosophy and life and be vulnerable. So it's like, I feel like it's important that I am aware of what's going on and that I don't just put on blinders for my own anxiety's sake. I have to know, but then I use the tools of yoga to help me process it and help me keep it lower than it would be if I didn't have it. I think sometimes we think things are like a fix-all, like, oh, well, I've started running, so clearly I'm going to have like a marathoner body. And it's like, well, no, because certain people have that body you're thinking of, not everybody, but your body will have, better lung capacity than it did before. And so it still matters, even if you don't massively suddenly change to a different bone structure, so it's like, I have anxiety. That's there. I'm not going to like completely dissipate it. Maybe I could someday, but like, it's there. And that comes from all sorts of things from my own experience. But now I've got tools and a practice that can help me calm it. And so it's the improvements that matter, not the like perfection.
And
Don't know if
that
that's
was
making sense.
no, it does. And the reason why I actually asked you that question, and it was, I remember I was like, oh, because I'm in lockdown. I think you told me and said we can edit this if you want. So but you went through a really tough time while you're at Sky. You had you had a lump, and you
Yeah,
broke
I
up with
was,
your
oh,
boyfriend at the
2019
time,
was, yeah, it was
and
horrific.
I
It was like, it
could
was
not
August.
tell.
Is the resting happy face. I'll be walking down the street and people will compliment my smile when I think I'm deep in like serious anger thoughts. And I'm like, huh? The stranger has just said I have a nice smile. Like, I don't think I'm smiling right now. So yeah, in August 2019, I'd lost my cousin by she'd taken her own life. I was getting scheduled to have a massive lump removed from my breast, and found out my boyfriend who I lived with was cheating on me. And so I had to move out, deal with the surgery, grieve with my cousin, while being far away from my family, all in one go. It literally within a 2.5 week span that all that happened. And my job is to show up and help people feel calm and happy. And it was like, so it was and it's not just calm and happy, but sometimes they see it like that. It's like, I want to give people that space and that breathing room. And so it was quite hard, and I did have a lot of time of like showing up and feeling quite like crushed and really like struggling with it. But then I also would kind of share it with students a little bit, because I wanted them to know that like, just because I'm a yoga teacher doesn't mean that like life doesn't happen, or I'm never upset or stressed, or that like, things can't be tough for me too. They can be. And right now they are, and I'm barely holding it together, but here we go. And what was beautiful? While those first 2.5 weeks were like one of the worst periods of my life, the several months after were by far the best. I have never in my life felt so loved and so supported. And I had this kind of theory of like, there's some people, like if you're going through like a romantic problem, they're like, they've really got your back because they're like all about that gossip or that stuff. And they're like, oh, well, he was awful, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But then there's other people who, like, if you're grieving, they really get that because they've lost somebody and they know grieving and they can get into that. And then there's the people, like, if you have a health issue, they know that experience, and I had all three in a 2.5 week period. So it was like everybody was ready to help. So it was like everybody could relate to one of the three, if not all or two or whatever. And so it was like everybody was so loving. And so, I mean, I was subbing a class at one of the gyms, and I kind of had to say, because I knew for the next like 2 months I wouldn't be able to do chaturangas or down dogs, and I was like doing a long-term subbing, and I said, I'm gonna miss the next week because I'll be in surgery, but then I'll be back, but then I might not be demonstrating for the next several weeks, but I'll be here, I'll just be queuing you, because I thought I need to tell them, otherwise that like if they need a demonstrator, they need to know not to come to my class because I won't physically be able to show them. And so this girl who had spent 2 hours in yoga with me in her life, because I'd only subbed there a couple times, said, I know from your accent you're not from here. Do you have family here? Are you going to be okay? Do you need a ride to the hospital? Like, it was like just like so overwhelmingly beautiful, just like the way people just came out of the woodworks to help. And I should add, this was in London. So when we say like Londoners
That's your
need to warm
influence.
up, maybe I felt like I kind of had done my job, because I was like so overwhelmed with love in 2019 that I felt like in 2020 I was okay to go, because I'd really experienced so much love and support in London. It was just unreal, absolutely
That,
unreal.
and that's beautiful, because actually, I mean, like, we've all had like hard times, and lockdown was one of them. I mean, I enjoyed it, but there was some time, there's some points in everyone's life, and the story that you've just like kind of said, there's always light at the end of the tunnel, and you can really see it when you go through these things. Is that kind of the message that you're
Oh
conveying,
yeah.
or?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's I'll be honest, when I was like in the throes of all of it happening at once, it was very intense and it was a lot. And, being a woman and having like a breast lump removed is quite scary. And having that happen right as you've been cheated on and newly made single in your mid-30s is like extra. And then also I had to find a new place to live in the midst of all of that, in time to then get myself to my own surgery and all that. Like, it was a lot, right? Like, so there was a lot at play on many levels that was going on. Um and I am, as I always say, like quite an optimistic person and quite a smiley and happy person. And I remember like the hurt levels, just kind of emotional hurt and like mental hurt and then physical hurt, with the surgery and everything. And there was one really horrible, and I've barely said this to anybody, but I don't mind because I'd rather be real. There
Okay.
was one particularly like horrible period in all of that where I remember thinking like, I wish I was the kind of person who could end it, because this hurt is so strong. I don't know how to deal with this. And I was like, I'm not that person. I know I'm not. And I know I'm grateful I'm not predisposed to that. But right now I am feeling this so intensely that I'd almost wish a truck would just accidentally slide off the road and hit me so I wouldn't have to feel all this, because it is unbearable how much I'm feeling at once right now. Which was horrible. It was horrible, but I vividly remember thinking that, like walking home from London after like being traveling all around for 13-hour days while processing all of this and just being like, this is a lot. I don't know how to feel all this at once. Like, it's like more than I know how to feel. Could somebody just make me stop feeling? Because this is too much. And like I went to counseling, and I remember going to them, and I probably went too soon because I couldn't even process it. But I just thought, I want to go because I don't want, some dickhead to mess up my happiness and goodness. And I don't want all of this happening all at once to kind of shorten out what I can give to people and how I can live for me. So I was very proactive in going, right, I'll just ask for support because I want to make sure I'm okay through this. And I remember I had to sit down, and you do this like initial chat where they just kind of ask you a bunch of questions and like, why do you want counseling and what are you looking for? And I said, well, I don't exactly know, but this happened, this happened, this happened, and this happened. And they were like, when? And I was like, in the last 2 weeks. And they were like, they were like, yeah, I think you should be at therapy. I think that's a very good decision to get help to process all of this. Definite. And then I had my first appointment. That was like a proper appointment, and they made me do this little questionnaire. And then the therapist kind of looked at it and she goes, so I read your thing about, what the report they gave me about everything that's going on with you, but you've just done this and it's clear you're not depressed. They were like, so And I was like, no, I'm not, but I am prone to anxiety, and this is a hell of a lot to be handling at once. So I thought I'd get some help. And she said, no, you're absolutely right to be getting help, but I don't understand how you're not depressed right now. Um, they couldn't fathom it. But anyway, all of that happened, right? And that was like a little shitstorm of awful. And like I said, already in the weeks and months after, there was so much love and beauty and support. And then lockdown happened. And in lockdown, I then went, oh, maybe I'd move to Scotland. And then literally the way things kind of fell into place as I moved to Scotland, it was like the opposite of the shitstorm. and
Wow.
and so, and it doesn't mean like then that's it forever. Life is life, right? And there will be more hard times, there'll be more challenges, there'll be more difficult things, but it then means, and we were kind of talking about this in yoga school, like when you go through really hard times, there's not always somewhere, there's not always like a cause and effect where you can go, oh, well, here's the light at the end of that tunnel. Sometimes there's not. Sometimes things are just shitty. But what we agreed in our discussion was, well, sometimes things are just awful. And there's a different thing I'm thinking of that was way worse, and that I will never see a good that came out of that specific thing. And I'm sure we all have those things in life. It's like you've leveled up, like in a video game. It's like you've beat the big boss, and now you're like the superstar one level up version. And so it doesn't mean that, like, yay, it's good that happened, but it means now I'm stronger through it. It's almost like going through a fire and coming out the other side and going, well, I'm still here. And not only am I still here, but I'm still here, and I managed to get through that. So yay. And
I
hopefully
like
that will
that.
make
Yeah.
me stronger for the next thing.
That's, do you know what, it's true. Yeah. If there is like a really crap patch and there is nothing, there's nothing that came out of it, actually it's taught you how to be resilient if something, or know the mechanisms to deal with that situation. Yeah, I see what you mean,
You're
because actually
capable
it's
of
not
it.
always a lot.
Yeah, sometimes like the 2019 one that I've said in detail, plenty of good that actually directly came out of it. Really, truly, and I'm so grateful. But we'll all have those things in our lives that have happened where you're like, well, Miss Optimist, I don't see the clear, awesome thing that came out the other side of it, and it's been 10 years. And I'll be like, yeah, cool, but you made it 10 years after. You leveled up through it, because like you are a different, stronger, bigger person. And I guess one student brought up that, hey, maybe not everybody necessarily gets stronger and happier through it. Maybe sometimes for people it's what puts them on a downward trajectory, and they can't see that way. And I want to acknowledge that there's that possibility, of
Mm.
course, absolutely. And I would think and hope that things like yoga would give you the tools and the headspace and the perspective, that instead of it putting you on a downward trajectory of this is all that there is now and it's all shit and I wish that truck would hit me, that instead you could go, actually, I'm going to have like me again, and I'm going to have my calm and my peace again, and I'm going to have that calm and that peace and that me in a stronger, better place because I'll have got through this. And so there's always hope, I would say.
Yeah, I like that. And yeah, I mean, yeah, and that's what I think. I mean, exercise, you got the yoga and, Kung Fu Tai Chi and things like that. It's as long as you give yourself that space and that time, regardless of what happens, everything stays at the door, basically. That's what my instructor tells me as well. It's like, you know, whatever happened today, it stays at the door. You're coming here to learn, and
Yeah.
it really, it really does. It kind of sets your mind. I've been doing it for 10 years now. So I don't know if you know that. So I've been doing martial arts for 10 years, but every time I go through that door, it's like as if my mind just goes into that place where it's all blank. And I really do feel that, you know, so no
It's
matter
like
what
trained you to
happens,
have that
yeah,
clearness, that
it's
clarity.
just, and even though afterwards the noise comes back on, it's blah, 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 I have to put the TV on, I have to da, 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 when I'm there, it's like my person almost. I'm like kind of flat faced. I've got like it's like a completely different persona, and people are like, "What?" And the energy changes in the room and stuff like that. Um,
Yeah.
and that's what I found when I was in your class as well. You really felt like the love, if that makes sense, and the
Yeah.
positivity and the energy, and when I first went into it, I felt quite resistant to it. So I was like, oh, am I supposed to feel like relaxed and what's going on? And so it's your classes are like they're beautiful. They really are. Um, and
Thank you.
I've got an ongoing tradition in this podcast, and it's just if you've got a message that you would say from this little episode that we've had, what would your message be to the listeners of this podcast?
Well, I feel like now after kind of that last little bit, I think it's got to be something around, you know, having faith in yourself that you can get through whatever gets thrown at you and that you can level up.
I love that. I love that. Elena, thank you very much. And thank you for giving your wisdom to the Pocket Pals.
It's equally my students' wisdom.
And of course your students, yes. Oh, and they all comes from one place. That's great. Thank you, Elena. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.